Welcome back to France 24. We are live from Paris. The headlines this hour. The House of Representatives passes a $1.9 trillion coronavirus rescue plan. It will inject cash to millions of American families and businesses struggling during the pandemic. The EU Commission reaches a deal with Pfizer to supply an additional 4 million COVID-19 vaccine doses. The inoculations will be sent to virus hotspots within the bloc. And Brazil's former president makes his first public statement since his corruption convictions were annulled. Lula da Silva says he's willing to talk to anyone to get Jair Bolsonaro out of office. The House of Representatives have passed a $1.9 trillion coronavirus rescue plan. The package was months in the making and will inject cash to millions of families and businesses throughout the United States struggling during the pandemic. Republican lawmakers have hit out at the bill over what they called a laundry list of left-wing priorities. France 24's Ketiman Gojestani has more on why this bill is a big win for Biden.
It's the first legislative victory for Joe Biden and one that will likely be defining for his presidency, at least the beginning of his presidency, because this was a pledge of his to get the United States out of this pandemic, both health-wise and on the economy. And that's exactly what he has done there with this bill passed through Congress, passed really along partisan lines, both in the Senate and in the House. Just one Democrat deciding to vote against that relief bill. But this relief bill really is a much needed help for Americans. There's, of course, these $1,400 checks to individuals making less than $75,000. There's also the expansion of the $300 weekly unemployment benefits that will be running all the way through September 6th. There are also other things like the expansion of child tax credits, funding for small businesses, funding for schools, funding for local and state authorities, as well as more funding for testing and vaccination. So it's really an all-encompassing bill. And as you said, that brought some criticism from the Republicans who say that basically the Democrats are using COVID-19 to try to push through some of their biggest progressive wishes. But for the Americans, this will bring some relief. There's a race against the clock now, of course, to get it on Joe Biden's desk. He had always asked for it to be done before March 14th. That's when unemployment benefits are going to start to run out for more than 10 million Americans. So that's why the Democrats and Joe Biden were pushing this hard to try to get this bill to his desk very quickly.
Ketiman Gojestani reporting there earlier from Washington. Next, the European Commission has reached a deal with Pfizer to supply an additional 4 million coronavirus vaccine doses. The inoculations will be sent to virus hotspots within the bloc. Over the past few weeks, COVID-19 has been spreading fast in parts of France, Italy, Austria, and Germany. Claire Rush reports.
Some promising news for the EU's sluggish vaccination effort.
The Commission negotiated an additional 4 million doses of BioNTech-Pfizer vaccine. Still in March, it is on top of the actual delivery schedule.
The additional shots will be added on to the EU's existing agreement with Pfizer and BioNTech. Enough to vaccinate 2 million people, the doses will be delivered this month to hotspots throughout the bloc, including hard-hit border regions. Brussels says the increase in March deliveries is a result of the successful expansion of manufacturing capacities in Europe. Welcome news for the bloc, which has grappled with the shortfall in shipments. Pfizer delayed EU deliveries in January as it worked to increase capacity at its Belgian plant. While it has since ramped up production, other drug makers, most notably AstraZeneca, are also behind schedule. It too announced major supply cuts in January, slashing first-quarter deliveries by nearly half. But there is a vaccine booster on the horizon, the imminent authorization of the Johnson & Johnson jab by the European Medicines Agency, EMA.
I don't want to anticipate, but I have the feeling that EMA will give authorization within the next, hopefully, days or hours, which is a very good news, because then we will have 4 vaccines ready to go.
The expected rollout of the one-shot Johnson & Johnson vaccine is already facing complications, however. The U.S. drug maker has reportedly told the EU that supply issues may prevent it from meeting its delivery goal of 55 million doses by the end of June.
Italy has reported over 22,000 new coronavirus infections in the past 24 hours. The death toll in the country stands at over 100,000, with 332 people dying from COVID-19 within the past day. For more on the spread of the virus in the country, here's Asima Gupta reporting from Rome.
Serious concern here about the fact that the numbers are creeping back up, and of course, most importantly, the impact that's having on hospitals in the country. We've just heard that the order of doctors in the northern region of Piedmont saying very clearly that they want their region to be designated a red zone because they're concerned about what they're seeing in the hospitals with increased hospitalizations as well as intensive care admissions because of COVID-19. There is concern, though, the impact this will have in terms of people's livelihoods if there is a very strict lockdown in place across the country. While life expectancy has dropped, the poverty level in the country has increased to the highest levels it has in 15 years. That said, though, they're looking at the possibility of not just having red zones across the country, but those targeted ones, but also the possibility of a weekend lockdown. That means over the weekend, stopping all non-essential activities, non-essential shops being shut. So that's one possibility they're looking at. We're going to have to wait and see what the authorities say. We do know that the government of Prime Minister Mario Draghi is meeting with these experts, the scientists and the technical experts in the coming hours and days to come up with a plan. But clearly, they feel something needs to be done. The death toll has already surpassed 100,000 here in Italy, the highest it is in all of Europe.
Seema Gupta reporting there earlier from Rome. Nearly 2,000 people have died from COVID-19 in Brazil on Tuesday. The figure is the country's highest single-day death toll since the pandemic began. Regional health authorities are taking measures to limit the spread of the virus, and the World Health Organization is warning that Brazil poses an international threat if COVID-19 continues to spread uncontrollably. Sharon Gaffney reports.
Empty streets in Brazil's third largest city after an overnight curfew was imposed this week. Local authorities here are the latest to take matters into their own hands as individual states introduce restrictions to tackle rising numbers of COVID cases.
Eu acredito que é necessário pela situação que a gente enfrenta hoje da quase lotação das UTIs.
Researchers warn that more than 80% of ICU beds are occupied in 25 state capitals. The situation is even more critical in places like Rio, Brasilia and Sao Paulo, while ICU capacity has been exceeded in 2 cities. Amid calls for a nationwide lockdown, President Bolsonaro continues to downplay the threat posed by the virus and this week told Brazilians to stop whining. With less than 4% of the population fully inoculated, governors say they'll join forces to buy shots directly from manufacturers.
The health system in Brazil is on the verge of collapse. President Jair Bolsonaro's denialism contributed to this.
Brazil has recorded 11 million COVID cases and more than 266,000 deaths, the second highest toll in the world. On Tuesday, it reported almost 2,000 cases, a new daily record.
A cada minuto, uma família perdeu familiar. Isso não é normal. Isso não pode ser banalizado.
The WHO has warned that Brazil poses an international threat if it fails to control the spread of the virus, after researchers said variants of concern had become dominant in several states.
Lula da Silva made his first public comment since Brazil's Supreme Court annulled his corruption convictions. The former Brazilian president came out swinging at the current occupant of the country's highest office, Lula lashing out at Jair Bolsonaro's handling of the coronavirus pandemic, and says he's willing to talk to anyone who wants to help him get rid of Bolsonaro.
a minha vacina e quero fazer propaganda para o povo brasileiro. Não siga nenhuma decisão imbecil do presidente da República ou do ministro da Saúde. Tome vacina. Tome vacina, porque a vacina é uma das coisas que pode livrar você do Covid.
For more on this story, here's Tim Vickery reporting from Rio.
We've been hearing a speech where he managed to sound both serene and angry, both radical and conciliatory. This is an experienced politician who is showing that he's still at the top of his game. There's no doubt now that he is back as a political force. He said that he's been the victim of a massive legal lie, but the pain that he's gone through is nothing compared to the pain that the Brazilian population are going through because, said former President Lula, Brazil at the moment has no government. Lula has announced that he's back in the ring. He will be travelling up and down the country, trying to find solutions for a country that one day dared to dream, he said, but at the moment is living a nightmare.
Tim Vickery reporting there earlier from Rio. Now, the Red Cross says young Syrians have suffered heavy personal losses following a decade of war. The findings come nearly 10 years since the start of the unrest in the country, which erupted into a full-blown civil war. 1,400 Syrian nationals or those living in exile were surveyed for the report, and nearly 80% of the respondents say they struggled to buy food.
Devastating figures from the International Committee of the Red Cross. After a decade of civil war, almost half of young Syrians have lost a loved one, according to a new report, leaving young people especially vulnerable.
When you drill into how many parents were killed or wounded, there you reach the result that 1 out of 6 Syrians had one of their parents either killed or wounded.
The deadly conflict has left thousands of young people on their own, without family support. Further adding to their burden, bombed out schools such as this one. On top of that, food shortages and a crippled economy. Of Syrians aged 18 to 25, nearly half have lost their income, and nearly 6 in 10 have reported missing years of school, according to the Red Cross survey. Additionally, nearly 80% have reported struggling to find or afford basic necessities. And with much of the country in ruin, millions have been displaced.
It's been 10 years since we first fled and about 3 years since we've been living in this lorry. We sleep here, eat here, drink here. We used to have a house, but we lost it. We don't have anything but this lorry. I live here with my 7 brothers and sisters.
Having already lost their childhood and teenage years to the war, many young people now face the additional burden of rebuilding their country as it faces its worst economic crisis since the conflict began in 2011.
That's it for this edition of Live from Paris. From all of us on the team, thank you very much for watching. Stay with us, Iron Africa starts after this.
Fake